Okay. So we have been discussing the whole midbar, the mystical idea behind midbar, and we've been primarily focusing on the fact that midbar is a place that goes beyond human habitation, and human habitation refers to the regular order of things. Mystically speaking, we have the 10 sefirot, so there's the regular operation of the 10 sefirot. And then we have that which is lower than the regular operation. That would be the world of the negative, of klipa. And then we have that which transcends the 10 sefirot, and that is the infinite idea, infinite connection to the Keser. And the Rebbe has been emphasizing the idea of going beyond our regular human habitation, our regular order of things. Of course, obviously, order is a very important part of the life of a Jewish person and the service of God. But we also have to have the arrow in our quiver of being able to go beyond the ordinary and go to the extraordinary and we have to go beyond the order. So orderly by definition is going to be limited and measured. That's what order is, right? So we need that which is immeasurable. The infinite level goes beyond that. And this is the concept of the midbar, of reaching beyond the normal ways of things. And the Rebbe quoted two different verses from Shir Hashirim, and both verses in Shir Hashirim start off with the words Mizot Ola Min Hamidbar. Who is this that is going up from the desert? And the Medrash comments and says that the Jewish people are going up. Our ability to rise up and become elevated we get that from the Midbar, from this level of the desert, from this, and as the Rebbe interprets it, this idea of us being able to go above and beyond all bounds, all boundaries, and being connecting to this limitless and infinite connection to Hashem. And so the Rebbe then, towards the end, well, what we discussed last week was that there are, so we've been discussing the idea of two levels of desert. The desert below human habitation, it's too low for a human, right? That's the level of klipa. We shouldn't go there, but sometimes we do. And then the level that is beyond human habitation, right? The level of keser. And the Rebbe says that these are the two different levels of that the verse is referring to. One is referring to the fact that we got out of Egypt. And my assumption is that we were rising up from the level of klipa. We're rising up from this level of being involved and connected with the concept of what Egypt is all about, negativity. And the second verse is referring to the future time, the time of Mashiach, when there's going to be the resurrection of the dead. Tchiyat HaMetim. Then the Rebbe goes to explain these two levels in the service of a person. And we explained one verse is talking about who is this going up from the desert, Kasimros Ashan, like a pillar of smoke. What's the idea of smoke? So you have fire, and when fire acts on a physical object, it burns it, consumes it. And the Rebbe says this is referring to our level of refinement of the physicality of this world. So when we refine the physicality of the world, we, so to speak, we negate it, we elevate it. It goes up in smoke, but in a good way. And so this is a metaphor for the idea of birur, of the refinement process, right? What is the refinement process? The refinement is everything, all Jewish work that we do means that we are encountering physicality on one level or another, either in our mind, either in with another human being, or the physical world. It's all a matter of taking a situation where we believe we're encountering physicality and to realize that this physicality is meant to be elevated to godliness. So the way the Alter Rebbe describes this in Tanya, although there's, the easiest thing to talk about is food, right? Because it's something that we're involved with physically. And with food, physical food, we know that there is a process of metabolizing the food, where the food that we eat turns into energy, which goes into our blood and energizes our life, right? Every function of the body is energized by by what we get from the food. So in a similar way, Chassidus explains, so number one, you have to start off with it's kosher food, okay? So that already is going to be some part of the elevation, because something that's not kosher cannot be elevated. And that is exactly why it is prohibited. Why is it? The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, he says it's prohibited because asur means it's bound, it's shackled. It's shackled to the negative. And the word asur, which means shackled, also means prohibited, because it's part and parcel. It's exactly the same thing. So something that is not kosher cannot be elevated. And that is the meaning of asur, meaning this cannot be elevated. So to Mr. or Mrs. Jew, we say, don't touch it. Don't do it. Don't, whatever it is, the food, don't eat the food, don't do the action, don't speak the words, whatever it is, those words, that food, that action cannot be elevated, so don't do it. That is the word, that's the meaning of the word asur. So number one, it has to be kosher. Number two, if it's food, so we're reciting a blessing over it, right? There's all different kinds of laws and rules of what makes something kosher. And then there's all different kinds of laws and rules of what blessing to make and how to make the blessing, right? But the primary focus really of elevation is that this food turns into bodily energy. And the real elevation comes through how do we utilize that energy? How do we utilize that energy? So everybody sitting here at this class, all of your bodily functions are working because of the air that you're breathing is turning into energy, and the food that you've eaten has turned into energy, and that's allowing you to sit here and participate in a Torah class, right? So that's all of that energy from all of the food that you've eaten is now being elevated to godliness, because you're doing a mitzvah, you're studying Torah, or you could be doing a mitzvah. You could, right? There's all different kinds of ways in the life of a Jew of how we elevate all of the food, and that really applies to everything in Judaism. That it's all there as part of the process of elevation. So the verse number one is that the Jewish people are going up from the desert, and we have this capacity to, and because of what we're given from this desert, this power, this infinite power, we're actually able to elevate the physical food that we eat. So that's how the Rebbe sees this idea of the one verse talking about going up from the desert is in the service of Hashem. This has to do with elevation. And then the second verse is talking about the resurrection of the dead. And here the Rebbe also explains this is the idea of it's the idea of elevation of the physicality, but a different focus. And what the Rebbe explains is that when we look at something physical, so here I have this this cup of coffee. So I can see the cup of coffee. I can look inside and say, oh, well, that's made from a coffee bean. Or I could say, this has inside of it the word of Hashem. And that is, as we spoke about last week, that is the truth of the matter. And when I realize that what this is all about is the word of Hashem, and that everything in the world that we're encountering is an aspect of God that we are meant to resurrect. How do you resurrect it? You resurrect it. Well, the physical substance in and of itself is death. Why is everything physical is made from hydrocarbons, which are and anything that's alive is basically currently alive, but it's not true life. It just happens to be alive right now. There's a vitality in it, but really it's death. But there's part of everything that has an eternity. Everything has an eternity inside of it. And that is the divine spark. That is the divine word that is in it. And so when you consciously focus on that divine spark, there is a resurrection of the dead. That is the idea, that is the concept of taking something that would otherwise be dead, but now I'm thinking, oh, this is the word of Hashem. It's good tasting word of Hashem. But it reframes everything that you're doing in life. I mean, this is like if you want to talk about a great diet, right? Imagine that you eat food only in the service of Hashem, only in order to, because there's a divine spark inside of it that you're meant to elevate. Well, then you're never going to overeat. You're going to only eat what is appropriate, right? Because it's just about the divine spark, right? There's a story told of there was a holy Rebbe back in the days. I forget which Rebbe this was with. Not a Chabad Rebbe. They'd bring him his plate of food, and he would go and he would look at the food, and he'd go and he'd reach and he'd find something, he'd say a bracha on it, he'd eat it, he'd find another morsel and he'd eat it, and he ate just a few morsels from the plate, and the rest of it he did not eat. And he basically, did not indulge in physicality at all. He passed away. His son succeeded him as the Rebbe. They brought him his plate of food. The son ate the whole dish. He ate the whole thing. I mean, for, not a horrible thing to do, right? You don't want to be rude, leave food over. He ate the whole dish, but the Chassidim were upset. They said, Rebbe, we don't understand. This is not the way of your father. He said, my father knew exactly which spark he needed to elevate. So he found that morsel of food, and that's the spark that he elevated. Me, I don't have that sensitivity, so I eat the whole thing.
I have a question for you.
I don't think that we can apply that in our life. I don't think that's the point, but anyway. Yes, please.
The question that I have for you is, how many divine sparks have there been? In other words, how many people have been resurrected? To my knowledge, no one, because they're waiting for the Mashiach.
Right. So we're not talking, number one, we're not talking here about a literal resurrection at all. We're talking about a metaphor. It's an analogy for the idea of elevation. So we're not talking here about elevating the sparks. Now, I could tell you exactly how many sparks there are. You'd be shocked to know how many sparks. So there's the general sparks, and then there's the specific sparks. Of the specific and individual sparks, you're going to be talking about billions and trillions, perhaps. I don't know. But the original sparks, Kabbalah tells us, the Arizal explains to us, he says that there were 288 sparks that came down into this world that needed to be refined, that needed to be elevated back to their source. Now,
Were they?
what?
Were they?
Were they?
Yes.
Oh, not well, almost. So they've fallen into all of the physical things that we have to deal with as Jewish people. Now, when the Jewish people left Egypt, it says that an Erev Rav, a mixed multitude, went out with them. And the Arizal explains that the Rav, which is multitude, is a numeric value of 202. The Jews actually left Egypt with 202 sparks that they had elevated. So since the time that we left Egypt until today, we've been working on these 86 stubborn sparks. So, obviously it could take a long time to elevate these sparks, and how it all works exactly, I don't know. But the point is that we have the code of Jewish law, which is the user's guide to how to elevate sparks. In other words, you follow the code. The code of Jewish law doesn't say that, but what Kabbalah explains is that this code of Jewish law is telling us how to elevate the sparks in our life. And that's with how you encounter people, how you eat food, when you eat food, what work you do, etc., etc. Everything in life is about the elevation of these sparks. Reb David, please.
Now, I'm not sure how this fits in. You're talking about like elevating the sparks that are in the food. And I once went to a class in Crown Heights with a well-known Chabad sage, and he said in the class that most of the food that we eat are gilgulim. You could translate gilgulim for people. Maybe some people don't know what that is.
Maybe it's better if I don't translate it.
Okay.
We'll just call them gilgulim. Okay, that's interesting. I've never which Chabad sage was this? Do you recall?
Rabbi Nissen Mangal.
Rabbi Nissen Mangal. Well, I assume he's speaking from a source. So there are elements of souls of people that actually end up in our food. And depending upon how we eat that food, that soul is waiting for us to eat this food with the right intention and to use the energy in the right way, and to recite the bracha on it with a little kavana in order to re-elevate that part of the human being back to its source. Interesting. So most of the food that we eat is gilgulim. Wow. Talk about.
He said this back in either the late 70s or early 80s.
Yeah, so maybe now it's different.
And I'm just saying I lived in Crown Heights.
Right.
So it was that period of time that I heard this from him.
Talk about eating leftovers. This gives leftovers a whole new meaning. Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi. Was there a question, comment, or?
I said, oi.
Oi, oi, oh, oi. Yes, very good. That's an appropriate response. Okay, so the second level of elevation has to do with really seeing the divine spark. I want to just add here that there is an amazing. There are so many amazing applications to this divine spark. I think one of the most profound ways that we can use it is in human relationships. For your spouse, for your children, and any encounter that you have to realize, and there's no exception to this really, but especially the most challenging situations, that it is a divine spark situation. It is a divine spark situation. And it is incumbent upon us, right? Because we get all of our stress and all of our energy goes into dealing with all of the negativity when we have to deal with something that we don't want to have to deal with, or people insulting us, or not giving us enough respect, or people dismissing us, or people whatever, or people, all of the different things that we have to deal with other people. Never, of course, from ourselves, because we're perfect, we're angels, but from other people we have to encounter all of this stuff, and of course we always, the default mode for the human being is we become defensive, right? And we have the different responses, the different natural responses when we feel attacked, fight or flight or freeze, or and it's Judaism has a whole different way of looking at it, and that is elevate. Find the spark in this other person. My wife and I, on Sundays, we go to the farmer's market, not for the fresh produce, but to set up a table. It's called Ask the Rabbi. And people come up. It's a way to connect with people. There's a lot of people who aren't going to come into shul. We actually have people coming to shul from our encounter there. People who've started coming and, reconnecting people. So we have an Ask the Rabbi table there. And this Sunday, yesterday, there have come, several times. We got a table of people who are protesting Israel. As you're aware of all of these people who are protesting Israel. And this was an older couple. I don't know that they were married or not, but there were two older people, maybe in their, late 70s or maybe their 80s. And, they were out there with their offensive signs and their offensive messages. And our position is usually to just do our own thing and not to engage, don't engage with them. But sometimes I just can't help myself. So, but I don't want to argue with them but my feeling, and I have a strong feeling that the first thing that we have to do when we encounter human beings is we have to find a way to recognize their humanity. We have to find a way to acknowledge that I'm talking to another human being who is created in the image of God. And this can be a very hard thing to do when the person is you disagree with, or you greatly disagree with, or they've have these positions that are, horrible. But I have found in my life that if you are willing to acknowledge that you're speaking with a human being, you can create a little bridge. And then upon that little bridge, you can then possibly have a little dialogue, a little debate, right? A little connection. I think that goes a lot further than all of the other craziness that, how you create, you respond to craziness with more craziness, then of course you're just adding to all of the noise in the world. So anyway, so first I walked over and I was kind of videoing them, because there was a couple of people from our community who were there and talking to them, and and I was just gonna share with a group that they weren't getting any love, and then some altercation broke out, between a fellow in our community who's a doctor and like an 80-year-old woman. So it seemed very bizarre. She started hitting him with the sign, and it was she thought that he had accosted her, which of course is ridiculous, but whatever. Anyway, so I walked over to her afterwards. I said, and she was talking about how she was accosted. I said, I'm so sorry that you were accosted. And I found a way to find a human connection with her and with the fellow. And the guy said afterwards, thank you, Rabbi. I told him, I said, listen, the story that you hear, right? Because these people are hearing a story that's fabrication, right? Based on the story, if you hear the story that they're hearing and you accept that story, well, now what you're doing is praiseworthy. If you hear that there's a country that is perpetrating, the country that practices apartheid and is perpetrating genocide and killing women and children, wouldn't you, if that's the story that you hear, don't you think it would be a praiseworthy thing to go with signs standing out against that? Of course it would be. That's amazing that people are doing that. Of course, they have the wrong story. That's the only problem. They have the right reaction, but they have the wrong story. And I told him, I said, listen, if I believe the story, he said, there is only one story. I said, I know exactly, right? The story that I believe is the only story, but you believe the story that you believe is the only story. But I want to tell you that if I believed your story, based on what your belief is, that you believe this story, what you're doing is praiseworthy. I think what your story is wrong. But I was able, he thanked me. He thanked me for saying that, for acknowledging that. And in today's day and age, it gets so crazy because we like to just say anybody who's standing with a sign saying ceasefire, they're evil. It's not true. Some of them are, I'm sure. Some of them are terrible, horrible human beings. Some of them are anti-Semitic. Some of them are just believing the news that they're seeing, on the television. You can't. Can you blame them? If you want to, you can blame them, but it's not. It's not like they have to go to some secret internet site to get this crazy story, right? They're just watching the news, and the way that the news is reported is horrific, especially when they also film the whole Bollywood stuff that's going on. They have a whole filming industry where they stage bloody children and screaming women, and they film it, and then they send it to Al Jazeera. Beautiful, beautiful people, and CNN and whomever, right? And all of these crazy numbers, and they send 35,000, have Palestinians have been killed, right? This is the numbers from Hamas, right? And it's miraculous that the IDF was not able to kill one combatant. Only 35,000 women and children. But not one, they didn't get one combatant, right? That's never going to be, right? They don't make any distinction, right? Nobody ever, the numbers are.
They have a business that Hollywood calls Hollywood.
So what I'm saying is the fact that our news stations report this stuff as gospel, and this is what people see, I can't blame them for standing out there and responding as they are responding, you see. I have to find a human. Why am I bringing this up? It's a class in Chassidus. You have to find the humanity. You have to find the human being behind the nonsense and the craziness. And you have to, first of all, believe that it's there. And this is what Chassidus is teaching us. Chassidus is teaching us that there is that spark of godliness in everything that exists, and certainly within everyone that exists. Now, there are going to be people that are exceptionally off the deep end, and all bets are off. You don't deal with them if you can avoid them, right? But most of the human beings that you're dealing with, you have to see the godliness in them. And how much more so with the people that are under your very own roof, right? Your spouse, your children, the people, and sometimes difficult people that you have to live with. Sometimes all we need to do is acknowledge the divine spark that is in them, their true divine humanity that is within them. And that's how we elevate the situation. So these are the two different ways of elevation that Rebbe says. Number one, the first one had to do with the idea of the smoke, where the godliness is meant, the Torah and the mitzvahs are meant to refine, transform the physicality. And the second, where we become aware of the truth of this the physicality itself is death, and you realize the word of Hashem that is within it, right? Forever Hashem, your word is standing in heaven. And now let's see where we left off. So the Rebbe now continues. Everything that we've spoken about until now is the level of the desert. So the Rebbe started off, so this is all, the Rebbe started off speaking about the idea that there's Adam, the regular level of human function, then there's beyond the Adam. But the Rebbe already told us at the beginning of the discourse that there's a level that's beyond the beyond. So even the desert is the level that's beyond human habitation, but then there's a level that's beyond that. So everything that we've spoken about until now is the level of desert. However, there's a level higher than the desert. Even as we're speaking of the desert in a good way, right? So we're speaking about the way that the desert is connected to that which is connected to Keter, to the level of Keser, the crown that the Rebbe said earlier in the discourse. And this is what is suggested in the Medrash. That we are elevated beyond the level of desert, because it says Iluye, not only are we elevated from the desert, but we're elevated. So in Hebrew, it's a preposition thing. Mizos ola min hamidbar, mean who is this that is going up from the desert? Or it could also mean mizot ola, who is this that's going up min hamidbar, higher than the desert? And that's what the Rebbe is now going to focus on, that there's a level that goes beyond the beyond. So the desert has been the level beyond, and now we're going to go to beyond the beyond. So the idea is as follows. The desert is referred to, and this gets a little esoteric, but we can, these are all just different spiritual levels of that are spoken about, and as they pertain to the human being as well. So the desert is referred to as an unsown land, Eretz lo zerua. It is not sown. Now, Kabbalistically, there are parts of our body that grow hair. Funny enough, there's a lot of discussion of hair, sa'arot, in Kabbalistic literature. There's a lot of discussion about sa'arot. There are certain sa'arot, certain hairs that have to grow. There's certain hairs that cannot be cut. There's certain hairs that have to be covered. There's certain hairs that have to grow for a certain amount of time. There are certain times when all of the hair on the body has to be shaved off, which we don't do today, but in the case of the Levites, in the case of the Mitzorah. So and then Kabbalah discusses all of these different levels and what's happening with all of these different levels of hair. So there's this idea of there's part of the body where the hair does not grow, and that is the forehead. Now, for some of us, it goes up much higher than the forehead. But in any case, right, there used to be hair, but hair today, gone tomorrow. So anyway, so the forehead, the metzach, is an area where there's no growth of hair, and this is the level of lo adam. It's the level that goes beyond in the human himself. In other words, the human being, the Adam himself, has a certain level that is beyond, and that is Kabbalistically this level of the forehead. And there is discussion in Kabbalah as well about the whole idea of the forehead, and we know that on the forehead was the place where the golden plate of the Kohen Gadol was worn that said Kodesh LaHashem, holy to God. This is a level, and what level? Now we're going to go into the spiritual levels this refers to. Now, when we're referring to the level of desert, of which is the level. So when we're referring to the level of desert, which is the level of no man, it is not man, right? It goes beyond man, or no man's land. And as it is above in a spiritual level, it is the level of arich. So let's take a look at our mystical chart here. So in our mystical chart, so we have the 10 sfirot spelled out over here to the left, but every world has the 10 sfirot, and this is going to be relative to each world. It's going to be the level of Adam. That's how we function. These are our faculties. This is our system. This is our structure. Then we have the level of the Keter, which is the crown, which transcends the structure. Now, the level of Keser's got two levels, Kabbalistically. We have the level, number one level called Arich Anpin, and the level of Atik Yomin. Everything in Kabbalah is ultimately about creating a certain relational system. So if you have a level that is beyond, let's put it this way. You have the structure, then you have the level that is beyond, right? Is there any connection between them? Well, there has to be, because it's all going to be connected. So the level of, let me just use English words that at least we'll understand what the words mean. Let's just say there's the level of beyond, and then there's the level of beyond. Okay, that would be similar to the level of Arich here and the level of Atik. And these are both in the level of Keser in the crown. So the level that is beyond becomes the source for the existence of the worlds that follow it. So even though it is beyond the world, but that which is beyond the world, of course, becomes the source for the world. Let me try to give an analogy for this. You could have somebody who, you have an idea in your mind. And let's say if the person is a great mind, a great intellectual, a great, high IQ person, thinking about a concept in their own terms, in their own words, in their own way, right? That's going to be information that's not going to be accessible to us. And if that scholar would share with us what he's thinking, it would sound like gobbledygook. It would make no sense to us. And so he has to start thinking about how to bring it down to a lower level. And there's going to be stages, and there's going to be process. There's going to be a process of how you bring it from its most essential state down to where someone can comprehend it. Okay, it's not a perfect example, but it's just the idea that when you're talking about bringing something from beyond to be relational, so first you have to bring it down to the level where it is simply beyond. So if something is beyond me, I might still be able to see it. I still may be able to touch it. I just can't grasp it. I just can't totally get it. The beyond, I can't even see. I can't even sense. Right? So these are all, to some degree, just esoteric ideas and terms. I'm just trying to give it a little, to flesh it out a little bit for our understanding. So we're talking about the level of arich, which is the level, we're talking here that the level of arich is equal to the level of midbar, of desert. So let's and this is the level that the Rebbe has been talking about until now, that this is the level of the desert. So even though the level of arich is in the crown, it becomes the source of the world of Atzilut and everything that comes forth from it. So we have now, arich is a level of desert, right? But it's the source. It's beyond the world, but it's the source. It's the source of the world. So as it's the source of the world, is it still related to world? Yes, because it's the source of the world. And this is on the human being, this is the level of the forehead. But higher than the level of arich is the level of atik. And the Rebbe doesn't stop here. The Rebbe says, then we go to a level beyond until we get to what's called the central point of a level that's called in Kabbalah, it's called Radla. Radla is Reisha de lo Isyada. It's the head, the source whose beginning is not known. So what the Rebbe is saying is that all of these different levels bring us up ultimately to the highest level, to the very essence and core of God. And this is what it means in the Medrash that we are elevated to the level that is beyond the desert, because we rise up to a level that is beyond midbar, right? Beyond the level of he is not man. And we rise up to the highest level possible. So what the Rebbe is saying is that through our service of Hashem, our ultimate destination is not arich. It's not even atik, because we're soon going to see our ultimate destination in performing mitzvot is connecting with the very essence of God. The Rebbe is soon going to bring a teaching of the Rebbe Rashab that's going to drive this home. So until this point, we've been speaking of esoteric levels, now to shift all of the above to our service of Hashem. So regarding the desert, the verse in Jeremiah states, I remember you, the devotion of your youth, your love like a bride, when you went after me in the wilderness in a land that was not sown. Now, we spoke about at great length earlier, we spoke about how the fulfillment of the negative commandments is even higher than the fulfillment of the positive commandments. We said that the idea of basically impulse control, holding ourselves back from doing something that we might want to do, and we hold ourselves back and we're fulfilling the negative, this is a form of impulse control that transcends the positive. And we offered a possible reason for this is that when you do something positive, there's some level of feedback. let's say you studied Torah, right? Somebody might come along and say, oh, it's nice to see that you're studying Torah. Or you give yourself the feedback. You see, look at what you're doing, right? There are things that make you, you do positive actions and you feel good about it. That's normal. You yourself get a feedback for doing something positive. From impulse control, right? Let's say you didn't eat that extra piece of pie, right? You'll feel better in the morning, but it could be you go to sleep still thinking about the pie. You don't get any feedback for your impulse. It doesn't feel right. You're not getting you don't feel that you're getting anything from it. So it's a possible explanation of why this is considered a higher level of service. But this is called a land which was not sown. And there's a Chassidic interpretation that it can also be understood as a land that was sown with not. It was, in other words, with commandments that speak of what we are not to do. It's Eretz lo zerua. What is a negative commandment? It's a lo tasa. Don't do this. So it's a land that was sown. What was it sown with? It was sown with lo, with don't. A lot of times in our childhood, and a lot of people, they were brought up in Judaism where unfortunately their whole Jewish experience was don't do this and don't do that. That's not a good thing. But the point is when you become more mature and you become aware, you realize this is a very high level of service. Not a great technique for raising your kids, right? Or bringing other people into serving Hashem, right? Oh, so I want to get more involved with Judaism. Okay, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't do, right? You're going to tell them all the things you can't do, right? Person has to have the positive and proactive involvement. But we know spiritually here, the Rebbe is saying it comes from a higher level. And this is the idea of sur meira, veering from the negative. And this draws down the level of asher lo yashav adam sham. So we said above, right? This brings us to the level of godliness that transcends this world and transcends the normal structure of things. And this is higher than the fulfillment of positive commands. The positive commandments are on the level of Adam, where the 200 says in the Zohar, Tikkun Zohar, for the 248 limbs of a person correspond to the 248 limbs of the king. And those are the positive commandments. Higher than the positive are the negative. And now that I was going to go to a third level, to a level that transcends both of these. It's very funny because my son, I have a son who's a rabbi in Palm Beach Synagogue. You guys have ever been there? Anyone been to Palm Beach Synagogue? Rabbi Shiner? No. Too far north. That's too cold there. Okay.
I might have been there. I've been to a temple in Palm Beach County, way out in Palm Beach.
Palm Beach County is much bigger. I'm talking about the city.
No, I know that. Yeah. This is somewhere near, not too far from the Inner Coastal.
So my son called me before Shavuos and he said, so we stay up Shavuos night and we study Torah. We have, you go to synagogue, you have classes. So in their shul, what are they doing? They're having a debate. He and a colleague are going to be debating two other colleagues on what's higher, the fulfillment of negative commandments or the fulfillment of positive commandments? Which one is on a higher level? And they're going to debate this. So he was asking me. So I had information from this mimer that we're studying to help him out. So,
Rabbi?
Yes, Moshe.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the positive commandments are more chesed, and the negative commandments are more gebordik. I mean, there's what you're saying is rather very interesting, and it seems to be affecting me in some way as you're saying it, because I know there's some cultures that are more gebordik, and there's some cultures that are more chesed, and I think that what has more emphasis is based on the culture where they where there's more Gevurah and there's more Chesed, that's where I think the positive commandments and the negative commandments would have an effect on a person's life, and the emphasis that would be placed on it. Like so Syrian
I have to admit, Moshe, it's an esoteric concept. I don't totally. I'm saying the words, I'm teaching the discourse, but I think we all relate to positive commandments much more than we relate to negative commandments.
Of course.
If anybody wants
a
Jewish experience, it's not going to be, what an amazing Passover. I didn't eat chametz the whole 8 days. That's not going to usually be their experience, right? It's going to be, we had a beautiful Seder, we told the story, there was such a great drash, and the matzah was amazing matzah.
I didn't kill anybody, I didn't steal.
Anybody.
Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill.
So
I didn't covet anybody's matzah.
We relate to the positive much more. And that's when we say, what is Judaism all about? No one's going to say it's all about the negative. Nevertheless, that whole reason why the fact that the positive resonates with us more might be a little bit of why Kabbalah explains that the negative mitzvot stem from a higher level. But a higher level doesn't mean that that's what our whole practice is. That just means that they're on a higher level.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next week, God willing, we will get to the third level that transcends both the idea of the negative and the idea of the positive. And there's going to be the negative is the level of we've said is the level of arich, of the level that is beyond the structure, and the positive is part of the structure. It says in the Zohar that every mitzvah is associated with one of the 4 letters of the divine name. The Yud Kei Vav Kei, the 4-letter name of God, is the manifestation of the structure of the system of the 10 Sfirot. And as we see on the chart here, you see the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the final Hey. The 4 names of God actually represent the whole structure. What the whole structure is. So that's the and the Zohar says again, each of the mitzvot, each of the 613 mitzvot hang like clusters off of the different letters of the name of God. So that's the structure, right? But then there's the level of the lo tasa, which is the level of arich. Okay, thank you for joining, Ezra. We'll see you next week. And it's a level that's beyond. But now we're going to have a third level that transcends even that. As I said, we'll leave it at a cliffhanger. We'll come back next week with the third level.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining.